No Powers. She let me know that she was going to be unavailable.
Okay. Okay, we good to go?
Yes.
So this is Mark Frost, Chair of the Hood River Planning Commission. I will call to order our Planning Commission meeting for October 17th. It is 5:30 p.m. Let us start with the Planning Director's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We just have one matter on for tonight, and I really have nothing else to report. I don't believe we have anything scheduled coming up, so we may miss a November meeting due to lack of activity. It's just in the sequencing of things. So we'll circle back if anything's going to come up, especially as we get close to the end of the month and the holiday weekend.
Okay, thank you for that. And so nothing, no meetings in November at this time.
Right, unless we have an appeal. I don't see anything coming up right away.
All right, appreciate that. Okay, so tonight we have on the agenda a continuation of a public hearing of file number 2022-20, IBC Construction LLC, an annexation of 6 tax lots and adjacent right-of-way on with the idea of forwarding to City Council a proposal to annex or not these properties. Currently in urban standard density UR2. So the way we are going to run the hearing today, after the last meeting, we voted for a continuance and we collected additional written testimony. We have received some testimony. We read through that. We also had the applicant an opportunity to provide a rebuttal of that testimony. So we are going to pick up the thread, closing out that rebuttal, and then we will move into deliberation with the Planning Commission. I'd like to invite the applicant just to summarize what was presented by them in their final rebuttal, and then we will move into deliberation. So with that, I also understand that we have a request to discuss a procedural issue. We will get to that after we hear our final rebuttal from the applicant.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just heads up. I think I'm hoping we just promoted the applicant's attorney. Yeah, that's good. And then I did see Grant Hinman, who would be most likely representing the procedural objection that was raised. And I saw the hand go up and hand down. So I think they've acknowledged their attendance. Typically we wouldn't hear anything, but for procedural objections, we will want to hear that.
Okay. All right, so then let us move forward then with the final rebuttal. Again, we have read through the materials and the final letter dated, I think it's October 10th. So if you can keep it to a summary level, that would be appreciated.
Good evening, Commissioners. Joe Gay, I'm with Schwalbe, Williamson & Wyatt. I am counsel for the applicant. I'm going to keep it very brief. I think we submitted a pretty extensive response and rebuttal already in writing. So I just want to highlight 2 particular things. I think I just want to reiterate that at this time, we still believe that it's not the appropriate time for a lot of these engineering conditions. First and foremost, can't meet the test for Nolan and Dolan regarding nexus and rough proportionality. And I think from a practical standpoint as well, since there is no ultimate development proposed with this annexation application, it's just not the appropriate time for either the city or the applicant to agree to some of these more specific engineering conditions And I just want to reiterate that there is going to be another time that this is going to come before the planning department. There will be subdivision and building permit applications, and that is the more appropriate time for these more specific engineering conditions. We raise these arguments because under state law, we have to raise them now. And we tried to come up with some sort of solutions that the applicant and the city that they both could live with. And unfortunately, I don't think we've heard back from the city engineer that they could, that they were agreeable with some of our revisions to the conditions. And I think the last thing I just want to highlight is, we appreciate the comments from the public and their concerns about density, but we are not proposing a rezoning with this application. The only thing that we're proposing here is an annexation and to redevelop the properties under the laws that are in place within the city of Hood River as they are today. We're not asking for any text amendments. We're not asking for any rezonings. This is simply going to be developed under R2 zoning as it exists today and as it's going to be within the city of Hood River. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And that will conclude my rebuttal.
All right. Anybody on the commission have a question for council? Okay. With that, then we will close the public testimony. We have a procedural question. Let us move to Grant Hinman. Talking is permitted.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, this is Jennifer Hinman. I am Patricia Hinman's daughter and just navigating the system for her. I actually have two procedural issues. The first one is that there was an objection to documents that were submitted on October 3rd that on behalf of Ms. Hinman. And I went back and reviewed the video from the last hearing on September 19th. And it was really clear that Mr. Kearns had indicated that, 926 was for anyone to submit any subject. And he said, on October 3rd, anyone can respond to the information that comes in on September 26th. I asked for clarification of that, and he said it was limited to responding to what came in on the 26th, which makes sense. And then the 10th was just strictly rebuttal for the applicant. And so it is my position that the information I submitted on October 3rd was in response to the applicant's letter. And I'm asking that that information be received. And it directly relates to the letter that was submitted by the applicant on 926, which discussed road widths, easements. He discussed all those things. You guys have read it, so I'm not going to go over that. But it does, I think there's various ways that the commission could potentially consider this. And so I'm just going to say the statutes or the codes for reference. 17.09.040 talks about continuances that can be granted for various reasons in various ways. So I'm just asking that the letter or the information I submitted on October 3rd be considered. One, there really is no bias to the applicant. He actually responded to it in his letter on October 10th. So there's one. If that's not something the commission is willing to consider, I would just ask that the record just remain open for another 7 days if the applicant wanted to respond further to give them that opportunity. And then in the alternative, asking just for a general continuance so that that information can be considered. And so that is my first procedural issue. And I don't know if anybody has any questions for me before I proceed to the second one.
Dan, might I bring you in here to get some guidance here for us?
Sure. I think Ms. Hinman recited what the rules were coming into this. And generally, there were this was one of the issues that was on the table, as I recall, dealing with the tree as the primary issue, and the new evidence that Ms. Hinman submitted, as I recall, related primarily to potential impacts to the tree on her mother's property that had been previously raised. No one can claim any surprise or last minute sandbagging on that. I think the applicant has responded to that. So I don't really see that there's really any procedural error in letting it come in. Be interesting to hear what the applicant says. And I would also be interested to hear from the applicant's lawyer if he thinks that the new evidence in question is even germane to the annexation criteria. So that's my sense of it. It's the Planning Commission is going to need to resolve thumbs up or thumbs down these procedural objections as part of its formulation what the record is and your recommendation to the City Council, though.
But it's your understanding that this response that came from Ms. Hinman was within that October 3rd timeframe, so it can be included.
Yeah, one could make that argument. I mean, there was nothing about that second go round that said no new evidence, and the material that came in the first go around was pretty broad.
Yeah.
So this is what is responsive to things that came in the first go round. So we'll see. I mean, the applicant has presented a nominal objection to it. I don't know if he's willing to fall on his sword over this one. Let's hear what he says.
We're not, and we responded to it. And I don't believe that the report that they submitted is germane to the annexation criteria for approval. So we'll just let that one rest.
Okay, appreciate that. All right, thank you. Back to Ms. Hinman, item number 2.
Thank you so much. The other one is, and I'm not sure how the commission deals with when somebody that's, has a stake in this finds new information, 2 days before this hearing. So last week, there was new information that was discovered by weeks of researching deeds and easements and those kinds of things. And so we discovered some information in the deeds that would impact, it directly relates to the Hood River Municipal Code requirements that the commission has to consider when they're considering annexation. And so it directly relates to 17.15.080, where the commission is supposed to consider municipal service needs, and 17.15.090, where the commission must be fully informed as to the potential impacts of the annexation on both the city and the territory proposed to be annexed. And it is my opinion, without the new information, the commission may not be fully informed. And I learned of this information on Thursday, which is the 13th. So unfortunately, it was past the time that was set for this hearing. I really don't think it's anything that's astronomical, but it is impactful. So I don't know if there is any type of process where I could do like maybe an offer of proof, and then the commission can consider whether it's important. And then Mr. Guillaume can say whether he feels like it's unnecessary or he needs to respond to it. I don't know how the commission deals with those types of issues.
Okay, I appreciate that. Go ahead, Bill Irving. Oh, we're still unable to hear you. There you go.
I'm gonna ask. Hopefully, Dan can respond, but I'm gonna ask a little bit more specifically related to the recent question. Is how does the record move forward from? I mean, we're a recommending body, and council is a deciding body, and council has a hearing, correct? And so, at that point, what's the possibility for this information that she's referencing to be introduced?
It is just a recommendation. I'll have to check, but I believe new information can come in at the city council level. At this point, it's more than just the applicant that's at stake. It's everybody gets a chance to respond to and review these things. So, the record at this point is closed before this body in the formulation of your recommendation. Let me do a quick check and I'll get back to you on what the code provides. But at this point, I would say I don't believe it should come in at this point. You can also, Mr. Gaon also has an opportunity to respond to this procedural objection.
I would just state that, this is the second, continued hearing, and there was ample opportunity to provide this information into the record, into the open record period. And before the hearing, there was notice of this hearing, there was ample opportunity to do that. And we respectfully request that the record remain closed in this hearing.
And if I may make clear, we didn't get this information until 4:30 on the 13th. I just do want to make that clear. The other thing I did is I did review the YouTube video from the last hearing where Mr. Kearns stated that the commission can hear further testimony on the 17th if they determine that they want to. So it says, I think it's a quote, the attorney further stated that the planning commission can determine if they want to hear further testimony on the 17th. And maybe it was a misstatement, but that was what was said at the end of the meeting.
There's a big difference between further testimony and new evidence, though.
Okay, that makes sense.
Just a point of clarification, 1709, which outlines the zoning code procedures, is silent. However, custom has been that in matters such as annexation and rezoning, that the city council opens the record for a new set of hearing. So that it's not explicit in the code, but custom, by the way we've operated it, it would open things up to allow additional evidence to be presented before that body as we continue through the process. So unlike an appeal, which would be on the record, we operate typically as a new hearing at that time. So additional evidence recently found or found between here and the time that hearing occurs could be presented.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, Ms. Hinman, is that good on your procedural questions?
Yes, those are my two procedural questions. And what I'm hearing is that the new evidence is not coming in, but could be presented at City Council.
That's what I heard too.
Okay. I wouldn't say it's guaranteed, but certainly you can make the request at the council level. There will be a public hearing there, and typically that's where the request would be launched. I wouldn't wait till the last minute.
Okay, then I guess because I don't know all the codes and things, I guess my understanding is that not allowing the commission to hear all the evidence is an appealable issue, but I think it is appealed to the City Council. So,
well, the Planning Commission isn't making a final decision. It's just a recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
So it's also not a land use decision, but it's it proceeds in the normal course to the City Council anyway.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I appreciate that. Okay. So this time then, thank you applicants for your final rebuttal. What I'd like to do before we start our deliberation is just check in with staff. Planning Director Nielsen, any other comments or questions you have before we start our deliberation?
Just in terms of some of the mechanics, as mentioned, this request was raised and initially began hearing at the September 19th hearing. The record has remained open to new evidence through the 26th. You have arguments and responses to that evidence produced up until October 3rd, and then final rebuttal, which the applicant submitted in writing on the 11th. We've heard the summary. Now it's time. The record has been closed. The commission is now here to deliberate this. Again, you're not a decision body in this. However, we were looking for your recommendations for matters that city council, who is the ultimate deciding factor, would want to consider in the recommendation. So whether it's for, recommend to approve with conditions, or recommend to deny, the item does fall, regardless of what you decide, it goes to city council. So we're looking for this commission and this body to provide us recommendations when heard before council, and the matter is at hand. So it's really your opportunity now to deliberate the merits of the case. Council and I are here to help you if you need places where you get stuck regarding the recommendation formulation mechanics. We're here to assist, but otherwise this is your decision and time to talk. There should be no new evidence. You are deliberating the record.
Appreciate that. All right, thanks. Dustin, all right. Commissioners, let's, I appreciate just to check in with everyone, see how everyone feels about the case. If we can get started with Commissioner Petzing. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. I'm just trying to figure out when things come into consideration. So there's a lot of back and forth about if there's a development proposal. And I'm a little bit confused about what this purpose is. I think the applicant indicates that this is a preliminary, what was the word that was used? A preliminary site plan. And I'm just wondering kind of what is the purpose of requesting these preliminary site plans? And if they're not used to make any basis or decisions, why are they there?
Correct. So the request before you is an annexation request, which by virtue is not a development proposal. You're not approving a site plan. You're not approving a partition. You're not approving a subdivision, conditional use. Any of the groups of what we would call development or land use entitlements that come through. The idea of placing some sort of concept within the annexation is helpful in terms of for the staff in evaluating some of the criteria that are included. The idea that the adequacy of the public facilities, the terms that and considerations for a favorable annexation, putting it in context the logical growth of the city do play into help us evaluating the terms in which this thing that we made suggestions and for conditions of approval. So the term sheet that you saw in some ways is a response to the realm of the possibilities and scenarios that could come down the line in the future for really any sort of development. So looking at this in context of generally what is to occur is just really a matter of some level of transparency on behalf of the applicant's part, and it helps frame the conversation rather than it being a completely developed from the ether. It's not an entitlement. However, it does suggest some direction that they will head in the future. If that's a helpful arrangement.
So I guess my question is, because I've just been trying to kind of understand the arguments, and it seems that when looking at this, the applicant seems to be arguing that annexation, this application basically should be approvable under the criteria, kind of regardless of what they intend to do with the development later on, and that we shouldn't make any plans or restrictions or any requirements because they could change their mind and do something totally different. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, do you agree with that? And if so, why is there this preliminary site plan at all?
Maybe if I could inject a bit, because I've seen a number of these kind of proposals come before quite a few jurisdictions in my time. And there's just a basic human, the way human minds work is they want to know like what's going to happen with this property to help them understand it. And if there's no actual development proposal that comes with it, then it's very speculative. And so when you evaluate the annexation criteria without a concrete proposal, which is the case here, you have to assume the worst case scenario that, if this is annexed, then 10 minutes later, this developer or property owner could sell the project to someone else and they could build anything that's allowed under the zoning that applies, or they could apply for a zone change. So you have to assume worst case scenario, and that's why the focus is on public facilities and connectivity and those sorts of things. This land has been in the city's urban growth boundary, I think, since the beginning, which would be like 1984, and it's therefore always been assumed available and appropriate to develop at urban densities with urban uses. So it's been its future all along. And so the conditions that staff is suggesting pertain to just ensuring that it is connected, that there are these public facilities that will be adequate to serve whatever happens, whatever urban thing happens on this property. And so worst case scenario, most intense, most dense kind of development is what you have to assume in the context of looking at urban service facility levels.
Okay. Thank you. That helps a bit, although I hope it wouldn't be called worst case scenario.
When I say worst, I mean most dense, most intense in terms of demands on public services and facilities. So that's what I say. Worst case scenario under the current zoning or whatever zoning they could apply for, demands on public facilities.
Commissioner Petting, anything else?
Not at the moment.
All right, Commissioner Stepina.
I just might add that it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the code in 1715.060 for the evaluation criteria for undeveloped land, exactly what Dan has been referring to and what Dustin's referred to in terms of some of the criteria the city's capable of providing and maintaining its full range of urban services to property without, et cetera, et cetera. It seems to align to the code there, does it not? Is that interpretation correct?
Well, it's your body's decision to determine whether it's correct. I think in the
No, but is that the thinking of the city in regards to this? Why there's such focus on this? Because the evaluation criteria for undeveloped land that we have to use specifically calls out the kinds of things that are being asked for by city engineering, et cetera.
Right. So the way that it's framed is conditions of approval. So in order to find compliance as the staff, we've included this to ensure that, aside from the natural extension, that there are criterias that were such as maintaining services without negatively impacting our ability to serve all areas, convenience to the applicant, without a commitment to the proposed development. Does the public need, or does the public weigh the increase of burden of services? These are the areas in order to buttress these and make affirmative findings without some known quantity, without a concrete development proposal. This is the manner in which staff has found our ability to affirm these questions, if that helps.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm just pointing out that it doesn't seem unfounded or outlandish that the city would be asking for that, because it is called out in the evaluation criteria for undeveloped land, those types of considerations when we're reviewing this, even though there's a lack of a development plan or anything. So, okay, I just probably just wanted to say that because that's, you know, like the other commissioners to know that it does say that in the code. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner Stepina. Commissioner Irving.
Hello, I guess Dan and Dustin again. So in 1715, we've got basically evaluation criteria for two specific types of land, 1715-050 for developed land, 1715-060 for undeveloped land. And it seems that each of these properties, while not fully improved to the standards that they would be within the city, have existing structures on them. And so I'm wondering how we chose or why we would be evaluating this or referencing multiple of these sections in our findings. And shouldn't we pick one or the other?
For the purposes of this, you know, I use the undeveloped land section because of the anticipation that development will occur in short order, including a subdivision on all the parcels that have been proposed. Anticipated subdivision of each one of the parcels that are listed in the program. So if not absent of development, readied for future development in short order. So we should have every expectation that there's development and subdivision of each parcel included in there. Therefore, the undeveloped property. One property has limited or no development on it. Two of them have existing dwellings, but as shown in the concept, anticipated for future development. I think, and it's again part of the transparency of the developer to state that. So that's where we use I relied on the undeveloped parcel. This is not like a swath of Henderson that is all readily already subdivided and built and being brought in. This is being brought in for the purposes of future development. That's why I selected the undeveloped portion for evaluation.
Okay, got it. Makes sense. Thanks. That's it for me.
All right. Well, I guess I'm interested in anyone's feedback. Oh, here we go. Commissioner Mitchell, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess this is kind of a, excuse me, a question for city. One of the documents that came in was from Michael Dewan, County Public Works Director, mentioning also recommending annexing tax lots 1500, 1700, and 1800 in addition to this, which obviously that's I would say, a somewhat significant departure from what, what was originally proposed. And I know that the applicant, I believe, responded to that, but I kind of wanted to hear from city about that, that email that Michael sent that's in the application. I guess that'd be maybe for you, Dustin. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so County Public Works is required to maintain some of these streets and utilities, or mostly the streets at this time by way of snow plowing. Wrote that, and I think the request is that they have more, that they include additional parcels so that there's less discontinuity and more regular shapes. And certainly we appreciate that. However, the request that came in was a request for voluntary annexation from the folks who have all assembled together and have requested to come in. Interesting that the owners of a number of those properties are those that have gone on record as not wanting to come in and actively resisting that. So you find yourself in an interesting position of those property owners actively cautioning or resisting the annexation of other property. So you have it's not a hard and fast rule as long as it represents an orderly annexation. Certainly we would love to have larger and oftentimes more develop pieces. That's not always the case. The city has tried to, in the past, annex the entire urban growth area as one piece so that it would all come in, and that resulted in litigation and lawsuit. So when it comes to annexations of the voluntary type, these are people who are ready, have readied themselves and are asking the city to bring them in. You know, there's different consents to annex in different scenarios, but at this point, the developer is not asked to involuntarily bring in people that have objected to this annexation to this point. I think that's all in the record too.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Mitchell, good. Okay, Commissioner Irving.
Okay, I'd like to see if we could get a little bit of guidance, as I don't know that we've really talked about this criteria in the past with other applications regarding 1715-060-8, which is proposed annexation does not negatively impact nearby properties, whether located within city limits or the urban growth area. In some of our other code sections, it says something like does not negatively impact the lawful development of adjacent properties, meaning it's or doesn't conflict with the lawful development of adjacent properties or something like that. But this negatively impact thing seems exceptionally nebulous, and I'm wondering if someone could scope it for us, Dan or Dustin.
I'll make a quick injection here, but Dustin is certainly. Can people hear me?
Yep.
Okay. But that's kind of, in my view, looking at these criteria, they're kind of listed in order of importance, and it's not the interference or conflict type impact that you see in a conditional use permit or a zone change, because this doesn't necessarily have a development with it. It's going to be urban. It's going to be an urban type and density of development. That's all you know for sure. And so I think the evaluation of that conflict criterion, negative impact, has to relate to the provision of public services and the city's ability to serve. And I have not seen that impact on land that's going to stay outside the city limits as being all that critical of a consideration. It's a political one, and I would focus on the second criterion. You know, that's what it comes down to. Is it a logical? Is it a logical boundary that's going to be formed here? A logical extension. And that takes into effect all of these considerations as to whether it is or isn't.
Yeah, and as far as negative impacts as a fact-finding body, considering does urban growth within the urban growth boundary represent a negative impact? When I look at this, it would be hard for me to contemplate, unless we were unable to provide some level of service by annexing property in, by reducing its ability to, say, for example, we did not have the police or fire to manage this growth as compared to if you were in a better situation elsewhere, or if by bringing them in, all of a sudden we were somehow undershooting the current level of service or an acceptable level of service, which is a hard scenario to think about, but I'm trying to develop, something that would be a negative impact by virtue of its annexation alone. Remember, we're just talking about the changing of the political geography. There will, the ask isn't any development. The ask is simply becoming incorporated into the city. And that's really so looking at it in that narrow lens of how would coming into the incorporated city from the urban growth boundary after 40 years, how is there any finding of a negative impact scenario?
Okay.
And quite frankly, that's what the conditions that staff is suggesting get at, is to ensure that whatever urban development goes on this land, that there will be adequate public facilities and service. You know, most notably, the transportation infrastructure is going to be there.
Commissioner Petzing?
So just to, I guess one question I have is, this is just the annexation. If it came back and it was just a subdivision with no development proposal, and then it came back with just a development proposal for an individual lot on the subdivision, like, I guess the question is, are there concerns? It seems like some of the things that the city engineers have put are raising concerns that maybe would not have a place to be addressed in just a subdivision or just a development of an individual lot. Is that's still your concern?
Yeah, just for clarification, a subdivision is development. So for the technical term, like once a subdivision came in, albeit without the construction of an individual home on it, that is a development proposal. And I think for the applicant, they're concerned that some of these future looking conditions that are showing up are related to that development. And now at this point, they're not asking for any development commentary, nor they're asking for any approval to develop. However, the engineering and planning department has suggested these to anticipate, in anticipation of future development at this time.
The other thing to understand is your ability to address offsite impacts, especially transportation offsite impacts, is easier, more legally sustainable at this level as part of an annexation rather than as part of a development approval, because all of the applicants' arguments about Nolan and Dolan, they for sure apply at a development stage. But at this point, they do not apply. You have to decide if the inclusion of this land, will provide for adequate public facilities and services and form a logical boundary. And if in order to get there, they have to deal with offsite impacts, this is the appropriate time to impose that kind of condition, because it's much more difficult to do so at the development stage for offsite impacts, that is.
Commissioner Petzing, good there?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess, that explains the difference. I guess my question is that if at some point, like if the annexation moves forward and then there's just a subdivision, I understand technically it's development. Are we back in the same thing of trying to figure out, I guess, what's the basing it on the most intensive use possible with the subdivision? It just seems like the argument that the applicant is making is like, we can go down all of these steps until we actually tell you that we're going to build X on this place. How can you possibly know what the impacts are going to be? And I'm just trying to, I guess, figure out if we're going to be in the same argument if we get to subdivision.
Well, I think that's a good way to look at it. However, once we get to subdivision, the realm of possibilities and the spectrum of known narrows dramatically. So now we get to the point of subdivision. I say, all right, we have a 15 lot subdivision. Here's the realm of possibilities that can be born from that. So it becomes a little more, the range of possible outcomes becomes much more narrow. So we still on the city side will say, this is the most intense build out scenario based on your subdivision, we will continue to lean that way. So if it's a large lot, the code provides for anticipation of redivisions. So if we get a 15 lot subdivision that we could anticipate could be redivided into say 30 townhouses, we would evaluate it based on that possible outcome of potential 30. So we may end up there. It just becomes a much more known quantity at that point. So we have a zoning, then we have the rules and the possible uses that are available. And we just start narrowing to where that range becomes much smaller, if that helps.
Okay, we're good. Commissioner Hoffman?
No, everything that I had questions about was just covered. Thank you.
Okay. Well, in the interest of moving things along, I'm curious about how people feel about the application here, whether there's any things that they're seeing in the conditions of approval that they agree with or disagree with, to make that recommendation and move it on to City Council. I mean, starting firstly with the comment from the applicant, which is that maybe not all of these conditions of approval should be included. I think from my point of view, I'm in agreement with the planning staff, which is that now is the time to essentially set expectations of how we anticipate this corner of the city building out. And so I appreciate the inclusion of some of this information at this time, so that as Dustin just mentioned, that we're setting the tone, and as we get into the subdivision, we can continue to evaluate some of those decisions as we build it out. But I appreciate including that information now. So I'm interested if you agree with that, disagree with that, and any other topics you want to raise for our deliberation. Yeah.
I'll just say that I agree with what you just said, since you were asking if any of us agree. I think the interpretation and by the city in evaluating against 17-15-060, and the fact that whether this is something that's going to be fully developed or not fully developed to the extent that it can be, I don't think would impact the conditions of approval. This is the time to do it. It seems procedurally for the city's for the city.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Concerns? Yes, Commissioner Irving.
I agree, I guess, with both the previous commissioners. So I'm in agreement that we recommend approval with associated conditions.
Commissioner Petzing?
Yes, I also agree. I mean, it seems logical that this is where the city development will go. It's contiguous. It's inside the urban growth boundary. It's currently zoned R2. It seems like makes sense that this area is going to be coming into the city and increased density development. I especially think the concern about the Belmont 12th, 13th intersection, because that is a really bad intersection, and there's just nothing that will happen to that corner that doesn't involve making that intersection worse. So I think we should, if we're looking at that criteria of impacting services to the rest of the city, that's a major intersection for the city, and it's going to be worse. So I think including that makes a lot of sense at this point.
Agreed. And I mean, and the other topic that was raised by some of the public testimony was to do with the treescape in the site. I think as we look at the subdivision plans, there are in the city, ideas around preservation of trees. And I think as that subdivision is brought in, I think we can evaluate at that time where the streets would go, or the streets would go to mitigate any damage to those trees. So I think, from my perspective, those trees are important. City has a bunch of criteria around and I think that'll be evaluated at that time. I think we certainly hear the concern, and we we agree with it. But it is this is land within the urban growth boundaries Commissioner Petzing just mentioned, and it's a good place for us to be close to public services to provide the housing that we need in our city. So, any other comments or questions? Concerns about moving this forward? All right, so hearing none, then let's, I would entertain a motion.
If no one's going to make the motion, then I will.
Bill's got his hand up.
All right, Bill, go for
it. I'm totally comfortable either way. I'll make a motion that we recommend. I'm trying to see if I can find the file number. Is there one?
2022-20.
Oh yeah, okay. That I recommend. I'll make a motion that we recommend for approval to City Council file number 2022-20 with the conditions associated in the staff report.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Stepina is seconding. Okay, so we have a motion on the table to approve file number 2022-20, IBC construction annexation of 6 tax lots and adjacent right of way. This recommendation will go to City Council, and they will make the final decision on this. Any further discussion? All right, let's call for a vote then. So I will walk down the list. Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Commissioner Irving.
Aye.
Commissioner Stepina.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Aye.
Commissioner Petzing.
Aye.
Did I miss anyone? Chair votes aye. Motion passes. I appreciate the applicant bring this project to us. It's exciting to see more housing for this city, so I appreciate what you're doing. And I just ask that you take into account some of the things that you've heard from the public here about the way that we can do this development in a sensitive way. So I appreciate that. Thank you for your time, everyone. So that's the end of that hearing. And now we shall move to, we need to approve some minutes. All right, staff, any other questions, comments before we move on?
Mr. Chair, you have a couple sets of minutes before you. I know there was some interest I'd heard regarding ensuring that that some of the minutes from September 19th and the deliberation, especially in the final motion, was robust, especially for the rezone request regarding some of the commission's frustration and or sentiment regarding the inability of the current zone to produce intended outcomes. And it gets we went back to the recording and tried to produce that in there, but I know that was something that part of the message that you wanted to send to City Council, or some of you wanted to send to City Council. So I wanted to make sure that if there was anything that needed to end up in these minutes before Council considers this request. Again, this is a request that will go to them. I want to make sure that we have your minutes included so that they have that. That was just one place where if there's amendments that you want incorporated into, I'd be happy to try to take note of them now and knit them in. This shows up approximately page, I believe, 20. confirm that.
23 of 29.
Yes, thank you.
So I reviewed the minutes. I didn't see any issues with the April 15th, May 16th, June 6th, August 15th. No issues with those. I think my comments, Dustin, about September 19th, I agreed with what was written. Chair Frost agreed with some of the statements Commissioner Irving made. He was concerned about the character of the area involved and compatibility with surrounding area, conservation of property value. So there's a little bit that I had mentioned in the meeting that I don't think was captured here, and I'm going to email that to you. But basically, the way it reads right now, Commissioner Frost states that he definitely wanted housing, but would rather see a PUD or C1 approach. He stated that the scale of C2 doesn't fit with the character of the neighborhood. So that's what it says right now. I think what I'm suggesting to add, based on what I mentioned at the time, was that since the existing C1 zoning allows for what I'm calling an orderly step down of the built environment between the downtown core and the mostly single family residential neighborhood along Cascade and Columbia. I don't remember how I said that, but that's kind of what I meant, was that, you know, we have a C2 zone downtown, then we switch to C1, then we switch to, you know, the residential type zoning. So that's one thing that I mentioned I'd like to see added. And then I also mentioned this idea that, you know, introducing a commercial space, let's say that far out of town, the way I write it here, it says, furthermore, the introduction of commercial would shift the center of commerce from downtown at a risk of affecting the downtown core. That's, I don't know how I said it back then, but again, it's something to do with, you know, if you start moving commerce out of downtown, you're at risk of people not wanting to drive into downtown and or walk into downtown. So then downtown ends up dying. So I said something about that. I'd like to see that in there. And then Commissioner Irving, I mean, there was something that I don't remember if I said it or you said it, but we basically were talking about, you know, the City Council and Planning Commission should explore modifying the C1 zoning code to allow multifamily residential at the density, you know, available under C2 without introducing the commercial aspect. So there was something about that we had discussed that I don't feel was captured in the minutes so far. So any issues with, do we all remember those points? Any issues with those? And I'll send a quick update to Dustin to have these, you know, that little piece of the minutes updated.
So let me jump in. So I agree with all of the minutes other than that particular September 19th meeting. So maybe we make a motion that we approve those minutes other than the minutes of the September 19th meeting. I'll make that motion now.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
So motion on the floor to approve meeting minutes from April 15th, May 16th, June 6th, August 15th as submitted in our packet. Any further deliberation? All right, how do we vote? I will go around the horn. Commissioner Irving?
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Aye.
Commissioner Stefina?
Aye.
Commissioner Petzing?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. All right, so that leaves us with September 19th. Bill, do you want to add something there?
So I guess I had kind of two, I think it came across, I don't know how explicitly it came across, but I you know, my very specific objections to the rezone were based upon, and I think it's in there somewhere, but injecting a commercial use in that block face when we don't have one, you know, in the foreseeable future in that, on that street in blocks to the east or west of it. And then two, introducing a building of that height, which I think it's very clear that would be one of the largest buildings that we have, tallest in our downtown in that location. Those are my two really clear, I guess, concerns with the rezone. And so I guess if we could, and I think that maybe followed from the motion that I made, but I don't know if it was how explicit my concerns were made. And then to hit Commissioner Frost's kind of next point is, I think the thing that I want to see past the city council, and I sent this in an email later to Dustin, is that I don't want to have to do this again and again and again, where we have this housing argument and someone comes back, well, the only way I can get what I want is to rezone it C2. And we have the housing needs analysis that said we're going to put residential in the C2 zone and we have to account for it. So therefore, in order for anyone to do multifamily development, we basically rezone it. I want to avoid that. And I think we need to very specifically look at our R3 and our C1 zones to make them suitable for multifamily, because I don't think that they are right now. And that is the message that I would like to make sure gets to council.
Okay.
Okay.
Dustin, how best do we want to, is that enough words spoken that we can get an update?
That's enough words. We also record these meetings, so we'll have the opportunity to go back, and if those are amendments, those are the scope of the amendments you want, we'll be able to incorporate them based on this. So we have what we need.
Okay.
So if you're all comfortable with those amendments, your vote and motion will be sufficient for us to incorporate them in.
You good with that, Bill?
Does that mean that chair will review them before he signs them?
Yes.
To make sure that it's consistent then? Sure.
Yes.
Sounds great. Okay.
Okay. Any other concerns from any of the other commissioners with the meeting minutes of September 19th as written? Okay. So I'll entertain a motion. Bill, you have the mic.
Yep, I'll make a motion that that staff makes the amendments to the September 19th minute that we have just discussed. Those get reviewed and approved by Commissioner Chair Frost. And with that, the commission would approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman seconding. Okay, so motion on the floor to approve the minutes of September 19th, along with some of the comments that I just made about the step down of the C2 to C1 to residential zoning, and also the idea of adding Commissioner Irving's comments around the tall building question and making a request to City Council to evaluate C1 and R3 type zoning to allow multifamily of the suggested density without having to force a rezone to C2. So I'll review those minutes. All right, so let's run through some voting. Again, I'll just call it like I see it. Commissioner Mitzel.
Aye.
Commissioner Irving.
Aye.
Commissioner Stepina.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Aye.
Commissioner Petzing.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Okay. I appreciate everyone's time tonight. Thank you very much. There was a lot of information to read on our case tonight. I know that was a hard one to evaluate. So I appreciate your dedication to that. Okay, Dustin, we good?
Thank you all. I will give you notice if we have anything, but again, it looks like probably nothing in November unless something jumps up out of the ordinary. But otherwise, if I don't see you, have a good month. Hopefully we get some rain.
Thanks all. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks all.